My name is Melissa Carter. I'm 37 years old, and for most of my life, my relationship with the mirror was a battle. One of those silent wars, you know? The kind no one sees, but that eats away at you from the inside. All I ever wanted was to be loved. Just that. But instead, I was pushed aside, rejected, ridiculed, ignored, and I started finding comfort where it was easiest. In food. When I was a child, food meant joy. Popcorn on my dad's lap during movie nights, my grandma's little cakes that made me laugh just by looking at them, my mom's pancakes on Sunday. Mornings, I felt safe, happy, and even when the laughter faded, food stayed. It was like a warm blanket when the world became too cold for me. In high school, the names began: whale, blimp, fat girl from the cafeteria. I laughed along, but every giggle felt like a stab. By the time I was 16, I had already seen 4 different nutritionists, 3 endocrinologists, and tried every diet from fasting to cabbage juice. But none of them addressed the real hunger, the one that lived in my soul. The hunger for acceptance, the hunger for a hug, the hunger to hear, "You are enough." At 25, I reached 330 pounds, and no one noticed. No one asked how I was doing. I had become invisible, even as I took up more and more space. I smiled in pictures, but I cried in the shower. That bathroom was my silent confessional. It was the only place I could scream without being heard, cry without being judged. I began avoiding parties, dinners, even family gatherings. Someone always said something, even as a joke. "You're eating all that? Don't you think that's enough?" With that body, no one will ever want you. By the time I hit 550 pounds at age 32, I lost myself completely. I couldn't tell where I ended and where the pain began. Clothes from stores didn't fit me anymore. I had to order custom-made items or shop on specialty websites that charged twice as much, as if living in this body wasn't already expensive. Enough emotionally. But the worst part wasn't the clothes. It was the look. That look people give you when you walk into a bus, like you're a burden, a problem, a mistake. I became a prisoner in my own home. My heart would race just at the thought of going outside. I was afraid of getting stuck in the subway gate, afraid of the Snickers behind my back, afraid of falling and not being able to get up, afraid of needing help and hearing, "You did this to yourself." But I didn't do this to myself. At least, not alone. I was broken into 1,000 pieces by the words thrown at me throughout my life, by the hugs I didn't receive, by the doors that closed in my face, by the relationships that never even started because I wasn't the right type. Food was the only thing that never rejected me, so I clung to it. Depression came like a storm. I didn't see it coming. Only when everything was already in ruins did I realize. I slept too much, or not at all. I avoided mirrors. I avoided people. I avoided myself. I was alive, but I wasn't really living. I was just existing, and somewhere deep inside me, there was still a little girl crying for help. Everything changed the day my younger sister Emily showed up unannounced. She came into my house with a birthday cake and tears in her eyes. I had forgotten my own birthday. I was so disconnected from myself, I didn't even remember there was a date to celebrate. And there, watching her effort to make me smile, something inside me cracked. Or maybe finally woke up. Emily held my hand and said something I will never forget. "You're still in there, Mel. I see you. I love you. But you need to want to come back." It was like a beam of light piercing through the window of a dark basement. I cried. I cried like never before. And for the first time in years, it wasn't a desperate cry. It was a cry of release. That night after she left, I looked at myself in the mirror. For real. I faced the woman staring back at me, swollen, tired, sad, but alive. And that's when everything began. If this story is touching you in any way, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This simple gesture means a lot to our work and encourages us to keep sharing real, deep, and human stories. Stories that offer comfort, spark reflection, and remind us that no one is truly alone. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence matters. Always. The morning after my sister's visit, I woke up earlier than usual. I hadn't set an alarm. My body simply stirred, as if it, too, was waking up from a long sleep. I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at my swollen ankles and the pile of laundry that hadn't moved in weeks. And I whispered to myself, "You're still in there." I didn't have a plan. I didn't even know where to start. All I knew was that I was tired. Tired of hurting. Tired of hiding. Tired of pretending that I didn't care when people looked at me like I was broken. I wanted to find that version of me that still believed in joy. The version that once laughed without covering her mouth. The version that believed she deserved love, even if no one had ever shown her what that really looked like. That afternoon, I took the first brave step. I walked to the mailbox. It may sound ridiculous, but for me, it was a mountain. I hadn't walked that far in months. My heart pounded. I could feel the sweat running down my back after just a few steps. The neighbors were outside, watering plants, chatting, playing with their kids. I prayed they wouldn't look at me. But of course, someone did. A little boy, maybe 5 years old, tugged his mother's hand and said, "Mommy, she's really big." The mother looked at me, embarrassed, maybe sympathetic, and hurried him inside without responding. I lowered my head, but I didn't turn around. I kept going. One foot after the other, I reached the mailbox, opened it, grabbed the empty stack, and walked back home. I cried in the bathroom again. But this time I didn't cry because I was ashamed. I cried because I did it. I had done something that scared me. And that meant I wasn't completely numb anymore. I started walking a little, more each day. Just inside the house, room to room, 10 steps at a time, then 20. I made a chart on the fridge with a red marker and wrote, "I showed up today." Every day I did something small, anything. I added a check mark. Next, I reached out to a therapist online. Her name was Dr. Karen Wallace, and she specialized in body image and food trauma. Our first session was a blur of tears and long silences. I told her things I had never said out loud. About how food had been my best friend and my worst enemy. About how I had built walls with cake and silence, and how those walls became cages. She didn't judge me. She didn't tell me to go on a diet. She simply said, "Melissa, your pain makes sense, and healing is possible, but it won't come from punishment. It will come from compassion." That word, compassion, shook me. I had never been compassionate with myself. I had lived in a constant state of self-blame, thinking that if I hated my body enough, I'd finally be motivated to change. But hate had only made me hide. What if kindness could move me in a new direction? I started cooking again. Not binge. Meals, not shameful secret snacks eaten in the dark. I cooked simple, nourishing meals. 1 egg, a piece of toast, some sliced fruit. I plated it nicely. I lit a candle at the table, even if I was eating alone. I said out loud, "Thank you, body, for keeping me alive." And I meant it. My body was exhausted, yes, but it had carried me through pain, through rejection, through deep sadness. It hadn't given up on me, even when I had given up on it. There were still bad days, of course. Days when I wanted to hide under the covers and forget I ever started trying. But on those days, I'd open the drawer where I kept Emily's birthday card. She had written, "You're not a burden. You're my sister, and I'm proud of you." I read it over and over like a lifeline. One morning, as I stood in front of the mirror, I noticed something strange. My eyes looked different. Not smaller or prettier or anything like that. Just awake. There was life in them again. The woman looking back at me wasn't invisible. She was becoming real again. That same week, I joined a virtual support group for women living in larger bodies. For the first time in years, I said out loud, "Hi, I'm Melissa, and I'm learning to be kind to myself." The chat flooded with hearts and messages like, "We see you, Melissa, and you're not alone." And just like that, I realized maybe I didn't have to fight alone anymore. There was something beautiful about waking up and not dreading the day. It didn't happen overnight. But one morning, I opened the curtains instead of hiding from the light. I played music in the kitchen while making breakfast. I moved my body, not because I hated it, but because I wanted to feel it again. I danced for 30 seconds, then a minute. I laughed when I got out of breath, because I was trying, and that mattered more than perfection. Dr. Wallace and I kept meeting weekly. Our conversations peeled back layers I didn't even know I had. She asked me once, "Melissa, who taught you that you weren't worthy of love unless you were thin?" I didn't have an answer right away, but the question haunted me for days. Eventually, I realized it wasn't just one person. It was 1,000 little messages over a lifetime. Magazines that celebrated weight loss more than kindness. Classmates who giggled behind their hands. Family members who said, "I only say it because I care," while pointing at my plate. So much of my identity had been built around shrinking. Shrinking my voice, shrinking my dreams, shrinking my body. I had spent years trying to take up less space, as if simply existing in this world required an apology. But now, for the first time, I was learning to expand. To take up space without guilt, without shame, and that terrified people. When I started posting online about my healing, some people cheered me on, but others messaged me things like, "You're promoting obesity," or "Just lose weight already." It's not that hard. Those words still stung, but I didn't absorb them like I used to. I had finally learned that other people's opinions didn't get to decide my worth. Only I did. One afternoon, I was sitting in a cafe. Yes, outside. In public. When a woman in her 60s came up to me. She said, "I just wanted to tell you, I follow your posts, and I'm learning to love myself too. Thank you for being brave." I nearly cried into my coffee, because I never imagined that being honest about my pain could help someone else. But that's the thing about healing. It's not just personal, it's powerful. It creates ripples. As the months passed, I started to feel changes not just emotionally, but physically too. My joints hurt a little less. I breathed a little easier. I could walk longer, sit more comfortably, even sleep better. These weren't numbers on a scale. They were victories of freedom. Of course, I still had moments of fear. One of the hardest was going to a clothing store again. I had avoided them for years, after too many experiences of squeezing into a dressing room only to leave in tears. But this time, I walked in with my head high. I asked the clerk, "Do you carry extended sizes?" She looked me in the eye and said, "We do, and they're beautiful." I left with 2 dresses, one navy blue, the other soft lilac. They didn't just fit, they made me feel radiant. That night, I wore the navy one to Emily's birthday dinner. When I walked in, she gasped and said, "Mel, you're glowing." And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. At the end of the night, I stood in front of the mirror at home again. But this time, I didn't look for flaws. I looked for the fire in my eyes, the spark, the evidence that I was still here, still fighting, still worthy. I whispered to my reflection, "You didn't give up." And she whispered back, "Thank you." One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was this: healing isn't a straight line. There were mornings I woke up full of energy and hope, ready to tackle the world. But there were others when I couldn't even brush my hair without crying. There were days when old voices in my head whispered, "You're still not good enough," and I believed them for a while. But slowly, I started answering back. I am enough. I'm not perfect, but I'm worthy. That shift, talking to myself like someone I loved, was life-changing. For so long, I had been my own worst enemy. If I had spoken to anyone else the way I used to speak to myself, they would have walked away and never come back. But I had stayed, absorbing every insult, every ounce of shame, until I forgot what kindness sounded like. Now, I was learning to become my own safe place, my own home. I started journaling at night, not with rules or structure, just raw thoughts. Some entries were 2 words long, still trying. Others were pages filled with reflections, tears, or dreams. I wrote about wanting to see the ocean again, about the memory of my dad holding my hand at the zoo, about how much I longed for a love that would see beyond my body. One entry I remember clearly said, "When I meet someone one day, I want them to fall in love with my courage first." Because by now I understood. Courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about walking forward despite the fear. It was choosing to love myself out loud, even in a world that still doesn't know how to love bodies like mine. I started reconnecting with old friends I had pushed away during my darkest seasons. Some didn't respond, and that hurt. But others did, and their responses were filled with warmth I didn't expect. One friend, Jasmine, sent me a voice message. "Mel, I always loved you. I just didn't know how to help. I'm so proud of you. Can we talk sometime?" We did. And just like that, another piece of my heart stitched itself back together. I also reconnected with nature. It might sound simple, but sitting in a park, letting the sun warm my face, and hearing birds sing felt like coming back to life. I'd sit there, breathing deeply, feeling the breeze on my skin, and think, I belong here, just as I am. I remember the first time I stepped on a scale again. Not because someone told me to, or because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I was curious about how my body had changed. The number was lower, yes. But what struck me more was that I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I just noted it and moved on. Because for once, the number didn't define me. What mattered more was how I felt walking up the stairs without holding the railing. How I laughed freely with Emily while cooking dinner. How I danced barefoot in the living room. Even if only for a minute, that was my progress. That was my healing. I also began writing anonymously online about my journey. At first, it was scary. What if people were cruel? What if they didn't believe me? But the messages I received were overwhelming, in the best way. Women from all over the country and even the world wrote to me. I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I couldn't put into words. I haven't left the house in 6 months, but now I think I might try. Those words gave me strength. They reminded me that pain is universal, but so is hope. One day, as I sat at my desk writing, I looked at an old photo of myself. I was 18, smiling, but not really, trying to fit into a world that kept telling me I didn't belong. I looked at her and whispered, "You made it," because I had. I wasn't finished healing. I wasn't some perfect picture of health or confidence. But I was alive. I was living. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't just surviving. I was truly becoming. I wasn't chasing love anymore. I was becoming love. For myself. For my story. For the woman I was, the girl I had been, and the woman I was still becoming. And that was more powerful than anything I had ever imagined. The day I truly knew I had changed wasn't marked by a number on a scale or a compliment from someone else. It wasn't when my clothes started fitting better or when I took my first walk around the block without stopping. It was quiet, simple, but unforgettable. I had just come home from a grocery run, my first completely solo outing in over a year. I had walked the aisles calmly, without rushing. No panicked heartbeat, no downward glances to avoid judgment. I picked apples, read labels, even smiled at a stranger who let me go ahead of her in line. And when I got home, I put everything away with care. Then I passed by the hallway mirror, and I stopped. I looked at myself. Not just a glance, but a real look. No makeup, hair messy, t-shirt soft and loose from so many washes. And I saw me, not the woman I used to wish I was, not the woman others expected me to be. Me, the one who survived the silence, the one who rose from the pit of depression, the one who learned to hold her own hand. And in that moment, I did something I never imagined I could. I smiled at my reflection, a full, genuine, soft smile, one that came from deep inside. From a place that had once been hollow, I whispered, "I love you." And for the first time in my entire life, I meant it. It didn't mean I had everything figured out. I still had hard days. Days when I questioned everything. Days when my body ached and my thoughts were loud. But now I had tools. I had support. I had myself. My journey wasn't about weight. It was about worth. And I had finally stopped outsourcing my worth to mirrors, to strangers' comments, to past wounds. I began volunteering at a local center for young women struggling with body image and disordered eating. I didn't come in as a success story. I came in as someone still walking her path. I told them, there's no finish line, just steps. And every step you take, even the tiny ones, count. Sometimes I'd share my old journal entries. Sometimes we just sat in silence, holding space for one another. And in those circles, I found a new kind of love, one that had nothing to do with approval and everything to do with presence. Emily came with me to one of the sessions once. She sat quietly in the back, tears in her eyes. Afterward, she hugged me tightly and said, "You became the woman I always knew was in there." And I knew I had come full circle. Now, I wear clothes that feel like joy. I go out to restaurants without fear of being watched. I move my body in ways that feel like play, not punishment. I rest when I'm tired and eat when I'm hungry. I still enjoy cake, only now I eat it with celebration, not shame, and most importantly, I speak kindly to myself. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't erase the pain. As much as it hurt, it shaped me. It taught me empathy. It taught me courage. It showed me the power of choosing yourself over and over, especially when the world makes you feel unworthy. So to anyone reading this, wondering if it's too late to begin again, I want you to hear this. You are not broken. You are not a burden. And you are never, ever alone. Healing isn't a race. You don't need to look like someone else's version of better. You just need to come home to yourself. Bit by bit, breath by breath, choice by choice, I still have dreams. I want to travel. Maybe fall in love. Write a book. Learn how to swim. But for now, I'm proud just to wake up and love who I see in the mirror. I'm Melissa Carter. I once weighed 550 pounds and carried the weight of the world on my shoulders. Today, I carry only what's mine to hold. My heart, my story, and the unwavering belief that I am worthy of love, because I already have it, in me.